we're just going to kind of get started. So are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm
Okay.
ready.
Okay. So everybody, this is Joe Cross, a so-called Joe all over social media, especially Instagram is where I follow him at. And I'm so happy that he's here because of what he brings to my life and not just to the rest of the world. But the selfish part here is, is he's here because of what he's doing for me. And I think that anybody that doesn't know him, you guys need to go follow him. We'll talk about that later. But he makes a big difference in how I bring calmness into my life on a daily basis. So, Joel, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Scott. It's a true pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so we're going to get right into this with knocking out a few things with wanting you to tell us a little bit about you back because there's a lot of things about you that come from your childhood too. Your music. I know that's been a big part of your life. I think that's been a big part of your family's life, which is what I've talked about. A lot of exposure, and I think, through the church too, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of that. And do you find that you have to work with people to get things unwound a little bit before they can?
Yeah. So it's a great question, this unwinding, because of course we all have our stuff from childhood, right? And all these messages that are there. I kind of have a different perspective on it. So I think there's part of it, right? It needs to be addressed, is what I would say. But I don't know that it's as linear as we can make it sometimes. I've found that in my practice, there's something called our meta awareness. So the way I like to express it is, have you ever read Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul?
I have not, but I know
Oh,
that book. Yes.
okay. Yeah. So it's a really great book about meditation. And he talks about having this voice that's always going in your head, right? It's just going. The monkey mind, it's what it's called.
Yes, I've heard that.
And the way he talks about it is, imagine you're in a movie theater, right? And you're sitting in the front row. Not only are you sitting in the front row, but you're leaning forward because you're so engaged in the film. And so you're every character on the screen, right? The antagonist, the protagonist, all the characters, right? The supporting actors and actresses, and every one of them. And you're just on this wave of emotion, right? And that's kind of what most of us experience life like. We stay right there, like, oh, this is happening. We're like on edge, and that very busy, beta frequency. And once you slow down, you kind of relax into that seat a little bit, right? If you stop and pause, all that's still happening, but it doesn't have the same impact on you, right? And then, so that's kind of neutral. And many of us can get to neutral fairly easy. But when you connect to your meta awareness, where you're non-attached to those characters in your story, right? This is like sitting in the very back row of the theater, full reclined. You can see everything, but you also see the other people around you. There's a big space between you and the film. And so all of those things that happened, what mom did or didn't do, what dad didn't do, all the trauma we experienced, those stories and ideas and thoughts still happen. But I'm back here realizing that I'm the awareness beyond the thoughts, beyond the experiences, beyond the emotions, beyond the memories that gets to decide what I do next, right? And so the practice of meditation isn't always about unwinding, like I've gone this far down my path, but I've made this big old knot of things. And now I have to go back and untangle the knot and now make a nice, clean, single thread. It's more like I've attached myself to these things in such a way where I'm every character in the show. And all I have to do is relax, detach, watch the characters, and decide what my pure awareness, this piece that's always been there, wants to do about it. How I want to engage consciously with these.
So I'm in that theater and I'm in that back and I'm in this exact state that you're talking about. And so I'm seeing my dad over here. He's just, he was my monster. So I'm seeing some of these things. So as I'm looking at it, I'm in this state, and I'm now in a state where I can see it for what it is. Is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
See it that it was him. I didn't do anything. It wasn't my fault. The this is why I get triggered in this situation, because these are things that were said to me.
Mm.
And when somebody else repeats them or says them, and even if it's not even in an aggressive
Right.
context, I understand that's why I'm getting triggered. So now I'm able to basically, I'm thinking move past that a little bit, and I understand what it is, what it represented, and it's done. It's over with,
Hmm.
and I can move forward
Yeah.
without. Is that kind of a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the general idea. It's seeing it and then making a conscious decision about it. Because I
Yeah.
think part of the thing about like unwinding everything is sometimes it can be perceived as, oh, if I can just do this, then I can get on with my life. And I feel like my approach is like, it's all happening at once, right? It's just about your relationship to those things that shifts. And so maybe another framework that I like that's really good is Dr. Dan Siegel. He's done a lot of work and research in the meditation realm. And it's COLE: curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love, right?
Okay.
So if I'm triggered by my dad, which I can be, I think most of us can be triggered by our parents, right? Or something
Mhm.
that represents a part of that relationship. Okay, it happens. I'm in the theater. I might have been here for a moment, might have started to get on that first step to that reaction. I don't want that. I relax, I sit back. All right, I'm going to compose myself. Maybe I'll go for a walk to ground myself, and then I'll come back to this situation. So on my walk, right, I'm all the way back in the seat. Now I want to have curiosity. What's happening within me, right? What emotion am I feeling? Okay, I'm feeling insecure. I'm feeling doubt. I'm feeling a low self-worth in the moment, feeling frustration. Okay, how can I remain open around this? Well, let me ask some questions. Why do I feeling open? Why do I feel like I need to defend myself right now? What do I need to prove? What is the core belief at this reaction, right? And somewhere within us, there's a core belief of low value or low self-worth we're trying to work out. That's like the short version of it. So how can I bring acceptance in, right? And I usually just visualize holding my inner child, right? Or sometimes I'll actually visualize my heart, and maybe it's tenderness and brokenness. And then I just acknowledge, oh, that's okay. That was, let me put that responsibility back where it belongs. That was dad's brokenness. That was this person's brokenness.
Right.
It's not mine, right? And I can hold that with a certain level of acceptance, right? So it's correcting it to reality and not our emotional response as a child. The truth is that belongs to that person. How they showed up is about them, not me. I've always been worthy. I've always been valuable. I've always been a perfect version of me, whatever that means, right? Doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. It just means who I am is valuable and beautiful as I am organically. And then that brings in the acceptance, right? And then love. And the question I always ask is, what is the most loving response I'm available for, right? What is the most loving response I'm available for? Some days I have like capacity to like just be really loving. Some days the most loving response is, I'm just going to stay on this walk, tell them I'll have to connect with them later. I'm going to walk home, or whatever that means, right?
Right.
But what we're doing here, when you sit back in the seat, you're changing the relationship. And so if you think of the chemistry of our brain, the neurons that fire and wire together, right? So the pattern is
Mhm.
someone says this, I react this way. But when you sit back in the seat and you change your pattern, you weaken that neurological response because you're not so attached,
Right.
right, to everything that's happening, and just immediate reaction. You feel like you have no choice. You're powerless to yourself. You lose yourself.
Yes. Yes.
So when you weaken that response, you take that time to slow the process down with a bit of mindfulness. Now you get to decide, oh, how can I respond in a way that really aligns with who I am, right? With my worth, with my value. I don't have to go back to that situation. I don't have to show up the way I've been. I don't have to continually lose myself anytime this situation presents itself. And over time, that natural, the natural effect of that process is that it happens more quickly. So just as this used to happen quickly, oh, here's rageful, upset, triggered version of myself. Now there's oh, you start having like this Neo in the Matrix moment, you can see the zeros and the ones. You're like, oh, okay. That's the thing with dad. And it happens all in one breath. And you're just like, I understand what you're saying, but that's not actually true for me. What is true for me is this. And I'd love to talk more about it if you want, but if not, that's okay too. But I'm not going to prove myself because I have nothing to prove, right? It looks totally different. And so the unwinding is also true. But I guess for me, it's not like I have to unwind and then go. I can just be in this space with it and change my relationship to everything, knowing that that might always be with me in some way, but I learned how to manage those things a little better.
No, that all I'm feeling it right now. But so therapist,
Yeah.
or has music and that piece always been to was what drove you? That's always been kind of together, or did it kind of evolve?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the short answer first is that music has always been a part of my life. Spirituality has always been a part of my life. I grew up in Dallas, Texas.
Me too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We're
So
Texans.
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I grew up in that area, one of 8 kids. My dad's like a third generation preacher. Got a lot of
Okay.
preachers and teachers in my family, so grew up in that environment. And at about 11 years old, I picked up the guitar and was just infatuated with the instrument. And so one of the big questions in our house growing up was always, well, what is spirit saying? So there was always this tuning in to what is spirit inviting you to, in the Christian tradition, it's the Holy Spirit, part of the Trinity. But I think in a larger context of spirituality, we're always tuning in to that. We call it intuition, the divine guides. There's so many different names for it. And so I grew up playing and singing in church. And one of my favorite things was when those two really intersected, right? Like in worship, if you're in the Christian tradition, or mantra, or kirtan, outside of that. And you play in such a way where everybody's lifted. Everyone can release what they need to release and feel a bit lighter after the song is done, feel a bit more open, feel a bit more like themselves. And so kind of fast forwarding to college, I studied jazz in Denton, Texas, University of North Texas. Finished school there. And
What years was that?
so I graduated high school in 2003.
Okay.
And actually started college in the University of Houston for a couple of years.
Okay.
And then transferred in midway in like 2006, I think, to North Texas.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I finished around 2008 and just played a lot of music with a lot of people, wrote a lot of jazz, and slowly got into singer-songwriter music. I don't know. Do you know George Benson? Do you know much jazz music?
Absolutely, George.
Okay,
Look
yeah.
at my age here. Of course I know George. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I love George Benson. He's one of my favorite players, and aspired to be like George. George plays really technically and beautiful music. And so I was practicing like 10, 12 hours a day during this period.
Wow.
Was playing some of the most technical and clean, kind of virtuosic kind of music ever. And then I got tendinitis, trying too hard to be George. Right? It was like all of us, we try so hard to be somebody else. Right. And so it kind of had this big breaking down of my egoic structure in my mid-20s, because I went to a lot of specialists and they all wanted to just kind of cut on my body, and that did not resonate. And I was like, no, I'm going to find a holistic way. And so I fell deep into a spiritual practice of meditation around this season. and discovered a lot of literature that helped me do a lot of soul work. Books like You Can Heal Your Life, which is self-reflective in the sense of how is my internal structure manifesting in my body, right? So what beliefs, what places am I holding resentment or grudges, and what am I missing about myself? And so that started me on the path to meditation and expanding. And I realized what I really loved about music was the feeling, the simplicity of simple chords and melodies, which was so funny because I was in this space of doing the most, every possibility, every option, right? With jazz and improvisation as fast and as loud as I could, to writing some of the most simplest, concise pieces that allowed you to feel something, you know? And I started reading this book called Effortless Mastery. It's written by a jazz musician named Kenny Werner, very successful as a teacher at Berklee College of Music as well. But the premise of that book is that everything that we need to be ourselves was written in that seed, right? At our birth, right? When our parents came together, right? Just like every other creature on the planet. So we don't need to try to be George Benson or all these other people who are telling us what it means to be a man or a woman or whatever we're aspiring to be. But it's already here. And not only is it here, but when we relax and change our state of being, we are masterfully, effortlessly ourselves, right? And so this practice, he had about an hour's worth of transcendental meditations that helped you to get into this state of embodying your own effortless mastery. And so before you picked up your instrument, you had to be in this state.
Okay.
And so what that did is it cultivates what he called a sense memory. So it's like the opposite of a trigger, right? Certain environments sends you down the heavy downward spiral. Mm-hmm. And other environments like nature, we were talking about earlier, and hiking and all that, like, oh, I feel lighter, I feel calm, I'm getting in this energy. And so I love this concept so much. I did it every day. I still do it. And I noticed that as I start to practice this, what's most important in my life is the state of being I embody as I move through my life, right? Joe Dispenza said that, I think in his studies, 95% of the time we're acting from our subconscious mind, which is connected to our emotions, right? So if my emotional state is more grounded and more clear, I'm more present to all of life, and life feels more vital, more vibrant, more peaceful and calm, right? And so that's a large part of what led me to do what I do today, which is I want to embody a state that helps you also connect to yourself in that way, right? So there's a sense memory that comes from the practice, or maybe when a video comes up or one of my songs come up, or one of my pieces come up that remind me, oh, right, how do I want to feel as I am moving through the busyness or my daily responsibilities? Calm, grounded. And the way I do that is by tuning into the heart, right? So when I'm asking you, how is your heart? It's like, I'm so busy doing all these things. I'm in my head. Yes. I'm not in my body. I'm not connected to my spirit. And just that tuning in, we all of a sudden relax. You don't even have to fix anything. You don't have to change anything necessarily, except being aware of it. And that's enough.
It is part of this. Okay, so you got me fascinated on a couple of things with this. And one is getting back to the first part of how you were speaking to this about when we're born, when we first, hit the ground, whatever you want to call it, and how that is in us, what those things those external things that we're end up seeking or trying to be like others and things like that. Those are usually coming from, of course, all those messages we get after we hit the ground from all of that external stuff, our parents or whatever environment we're in, or whoever our mentors, teachers are, society, all of these things that we're taught that there's specific ways to go through and do things. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's always kind of also worrying about what others think and kind of slowing your own process down. So we know how much that's because of what we do. We know through our social media and all of our statistics and just the touch we're having, the feedback we get. We already know how big of a problem is that people don't know or they're not connected to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not so sure I'm all the way there either. And I don't know if you can all we get there. So I guess I'm leading to this question. When we are delivered into the world and we go through it, having all this information absorbed through our environment, and we then get away from that where we started, where you're created. Doesn't that have to get unwound quite a bit? Meditation is not something that overall is intertwined with therapy. Overall, psychological counseling, whatever you want to call the process. Meditation and things like that aren't really practices or part of the treatment plan. There are some therapists that themselves have found meditation and how it works, and they've learned how to adopt it but that's not something adopted into their practice and what they're working with people on that they feel it's valuable for, I think, right? Maybe.
Yeah. I see it more intertwined, and I've definitely been to therapy that also encourage meditation and Reiki and a lot of holistic practices, and even some hypnotherapists. So I think there's definitely a spectrum within all of it. And even as people I think the general idea around meditation as well is usually like the Zen passive meditation, right? Which is, you can't do anything. You sit upright, and you're just still and you're silent and you just stay there for hours on end, which feels like torture for most of us who are, especially in the age of social media, our attention spans like 15 seconds. And part of my, what I want to share with people without even introducing it, because I don't want them to be in a state of resistance just by the word of meditation, which is why how's your heart? It's just a question, right? For me, my definition, and I like the term mindfulness, right? And I think that's a more palatable term for most people who might have aversion to it, or if they're resistant because of its origins in other traditions or religious traditions. And my definition for mindfulness is attention with intention.
Yes.
It's like, it's that simple, right? So even as you're describing your cognitive behavioral therapy, that sounds like attention with intention, right? It's a conscious attention to this childhood and this traumatic experience with the intention of healing and letting that stuff go to live a better life, right? And so that happens all the time. And so what I like to share with people is meditation. We all are doing it. We just don't always call it that. So I like to reframe it.
It's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So we're all meditators. We all know about mindfulness, right? Even someone shared this really beautiful example on social media that I discovered recently. And she mentioned, that moment when you're driving in the car and then you get out of your thought and you realize I'm driving. Like, how did I get this far?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so she said that moment when you come back and you're present to the fact that you're driving, that's a moment of mindfulness. That's a returning to the present moment, right? Your mind was so in the thought of whatever it was you were ruminating on. You went there. You were absent from the present moment. Right. And then, well, how did I get here? And that's how it is for many of us once we've been triggered, or once we wake up to ourselves after so much self-sabotage and these patterns that weren't working for us. And so we do it in different intervals. We do it from moment to moment, breath to breath, year to year, and so on. And so I think what's really powerful about recognizing that is we get ourselves out of the resistance of, I have to be at this certain level. It's like, you're already at the level. You're breathing. You're alive. Right. There's one level, it's just called being alive. I think one of the most freeing things around my own ideas around meditation and mindfulness when I first started reading about it was this idea of the micro meditation. It was presented in this book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. First book I read on meditation, and still one of the most powerful. And he mentions, it's written by Thich Nhat Hanh, Vietnamese Buddhist monk. And the idea is, with every daily activity, add an intention to it, right? That directs your attention so you can practice mindfulness. So washing my hands, instead of just washing your hands to rush and, have clean hands and do life, actually wash your hands, slow down, and say to yourself, washing my hands, I hope that every being has pure hands to receive reality. Quick and easy, the 30 seconds, the minute you're washing your hands, but it shifts your state of being. It also offers a sense of love and open-heartedness, because many times when we're washing our hands, we're like, oh, I gotta go do this thing. Oh, this person's annoying, this and that other thing, right? You're in a state of anxiety, state of stress, state of frustration, and you're cultivating that state of being. We're so focused on our doing, we don't realize all that can be happening. The conflict with this person, the job responsibilities that I'm not too happy about. And I can experience those things with a level of calm and freedom. I don't have to be so attached to them. But when I ruminate on them, what I'm doing is directing my attention with intention against my natural way of being, against what I really want. It's unconscious. We do it unconsciously, right? Out of fear versus out of love, self-awareness, self-worthiness, right? Like, what am I worthy of experiencing? Happiness and calm and peace as much as possible? Yeah. So how do I do that? Well, I practice that by tapping into a state of happiness, calm, and peace while I am also experiencing these challenges in my life. Right. And so changing my language around that's why I say it's all things at once, because we don't get to escape life challenges. Even if we unpack the childhood stuff, tomorrow we may experiencing something really traumatic, right? We don't know that, right? That's the other part of the practice, is accepting impermanence, uncertainty, the incessant change of life. So that's what the real liberation is accepting all of these things and knowing that I have the capacity to experience all of these things with a certain level of calm and freedom. But I have to believe it, right? And then, like you were saying, like, sometimes reading it isn't enough, or hearing it secondhand, and I can totally relate to that. It wasn't until I had my own experiences with these things that I understood this can happen, a terrible betrayal, and I can actually experience joy. And it's all about my relationship to myself, right? Because my relationship to myself is, either I'm holding on to this traumatic thing that someone did, and it's so, the attachment is so strong. It's not even like a fishing line. It's like a thick, electric cable or something, right? And anytime something happens, that energy comes through that experience, and I'm gone, right? Versus I cut the cable. I know it happened, and now something else happened, and I realize that's actually about them. I know who I am. I'm secure in who I am. Yeah. And I can actually have compassion for them, even though they're mistreating me, because I can see through the muck, right?
Yeah, that kind of, there's a circle there with everything we're talking about. You just brought it right. Mm-hmm. I can remember, not exact things, but, from washing your hands to cleaning dishes or packing up my pack in my tent from backpacking, or doing things, and something has charged me up, or something didn't go right, or this, and so I'm jamming things in my backpack, and when I'm washing my hands, I'm fixing to tear the skin off my vein, because everything you just said resonates with me, and these are, hearing that, it's not like I don't really kind of know that. Listening to you around this is amazing, because there is so many other things in there that I already know that I can look at and do differently. We're going to move past this. We're taking a lot of time on this, but this is great stuff. But I want to get some of this other stuff in.
Sure.
So we're going to keep moving here. So the music, and I want to recognize it again. You're a Grammy nominated writer. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of part of the creative stuff. It leads into this question a little bit, but adding the music. But do you like we had with the meditation, and I talked about kind of as you're going into, you kind of got to be ready for it, or have an intention, that you mentioned.
Hmm. Hmm.
What is it you do? What are your practices that you do with creatively and to bring, and the meditation and all those things? What do you do to work those things in together, or get yourself into those ready for that?
Yeah. So I do. Actually, it's a framework that I use for my journal now. And you mentioned journaling earlier, but
Mhm.
it's really um, rooted in this idea of, if you think about, like right now we're having an exchange, right? And I think about you, and I love your friendly reminders, and they help wake me up too, right? I appreciate that direct approach. It's like very quick
Thank
and
you.
like, oh, thank you, Scott. Yes, I needed that today, right? So
Now
it's
I
like
got to go
all,
meditate.
yeah, right. It wakes me up, right? And so we all have all these angles, but there's a beautiful exchange, right? And so your intention there is so high, vibrationally. It's wonderful. But we have all of these other exchanges throughout the day that are uh, more challenging, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so the way I think of it is, every exchange is is mutual. I'm offering something, they're offering something, but at a certain point, I have a max capacity, right? Right. We all get overwhelmed. We need that time alone. But when it comes to creating, right, a big part of it for me, I think of it as channeling. I'm just a conduit. So if my container of what I can hold energetically is full, which it's always being filled every moment,
Right.
I need a space to release it. And so I have a conscious release. So sometimes I do that through journaling. Sometimes I do that through sitting or walking or meditating in any form. But the idea is just to let go of anything that's on my mind. So like that would look visually like stream of consciousness writing. It's like the first step in my Rise journal practice. And you just write everything that's on your mind. It doesn't have to be a coherent sentence. It could be images. It could be anything. And I write and write and write until I feel grounded and clear. And I notice just doing that is like, oh, I just feel good. I feel like light as a feather, right? And so once I'm there, I'm open and I'm available, right, to my intuition. I call it the still calm knowing. I have to match its frequency, is the way I think of it. Still calm knowing is always still and calm. So I have to get myself still and calm. And then when I'm there, I'm more tuned in to the knowing of the moment. And so once I'm there, I just hold space. I may have an intention, like if I'm writing a record. So you mentioned the Grammy nominated album. It's called Worthy, with India.Arie. In that record, she wanted to have a song called Worthy and around those themes. And so we had that intention. Or sometimes I'll ask a grand question, like, okay, divine, what does the collective need from me in this moment? I want to make space for that to come through, right? And I'll usually just get into that state. Now that I'm clear, I'll ask the question. And there'll usually be an idea. Sometimes it'll be an audible lyric or phrase or something. Sometimes it might have even come up in its own unique way as I was journaling or meditating before to ground. And other times it might just be a guitar thing, so I'll hear something. I remember I was doing this with India on one of our writing sessions. We did it together, like meditated, and then we kind of said a prayer, blessing. And then by the time we got out of the prayer, like it was, I say my intuition is loud because it feels like there's a yelling in my head almost of the idea or the thing, because I'm tuned in, or it's just that strong that day. And so then I'll just start playing, and then I get to experience it. Oh, how does this feel? Right? Because that's just so important to me. It's like art is about expression. And if I'm not in that feeling, no one else is going to get in that feeling. And so once I have a feeling, if it's in the music or in the way the line is flowing, now I know I'm on to something. And then behind that just is like this flow. So I just allow it to come through me. I feel like I'm getting out of the way. Or have you ever read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert?
Yes, I think that a while ago. That was how long has that been out?
It's been out for a good while. I'd say more than 5 years. She talks about another author, creator, and feeling this inspiration. And it's like freeing yourself from needing to create, but the ideas are just coming. And if you don't create it, they'll go to someone else.
Right.
So the idea was that this author was out on a walk without any gadgets, and they had an idea for a book, and it was coming and it was strong, but they were, pretty far away from their pen and paper. So they're like running back,
Right.
trying to write before the idea left. And I love that idea because it's, how many times have you had a good idea that you didn't really act on? You're like, oh, that's a cool thought. And then you see it somewhere else, like someone's created the thing, or they've written the book, or they've, created the content. And you're like,
Yes.
oh, so was that just me, or did they have that idea? And whatever way you want to think about it, for me, I find it really helpful to take the weight off of my own shoulders, to know that there's an infinite ocean of ideas that are just waiting for people who are ready for, to be made manifest.
It's kind of like you talked about at the beginning of this, when you guys were doing, writing and getting into some of those states and again, having that idea or to expand on, and you just, it was loud and you just took, you took action on it, through your intuition, all that getting connected through that point. And so when we don't do that, that's what you're talking about too. That's losing that thought or and then seeing it somewhere else and things like that. But then I think you also just then tied in that's okay, because there is, if you allow yourself to continue getting in those flow states or those states, that there is that never ending amount of, and so, maybe pay a little more attention to that intention and act on some of those things that are a big pull. But again, there'll be more.
Always.
Yeah, I love all that. Okay. So real quick, how can someone get involved in meditation or get started with it without feeling like I can get a little overwhelmed? Like, there's just so much to it, and it's just so much time, or all those things that go through everybody's head. Is there a way that you can talk to them about how they can do this without feeling that way?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to kind of let go of what you think you know about meditation, right? So that you might have an idea that was seeded by society, and that's fine. But know that it's attention with intention.
Attention, yep.
Right? And so we can literally do it right now in a single breath, right? So there's a very common practice in Buddhist tradition, and you have a phrase you say with each breath. So the fundamental to bring you present sounds redundant, but breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out, right? Which tunes you into the fact that, oh my God, I'm always breathing and I'm rarely aware of it, right? But you can also change that phrase, right? And so one I do very often is breathing in, I receive love. Breathing out, I am love, right? And just having that thought, that attention to the breath with the intention of receiving and being love grounds you. Single breath, that's a meditation, okay? And you can expand from there and see how you feel, right? Some days I'll just do a single mantra. Other days I'll do several. But I think the whole point is to recognize the actual impacts on your life. See, notice how you shift in energy. Do you feel better after just practicing that phrase? Breathing in, I receive love. Breathing out, I am love. Right? How does that make you feel? And then from there, another way that I think people can get involved, I host a community for meditations called the Beautiful Souls Community.
Yeah.
I lead a guided meditation every morning at 7:30 a.m. Central. It's a 30-minute live stream via Zoom. And there's a moment for gratitude. It's very easy. It's light. And then there's an introspective question for the day, along with maybe a reading or a theme. And then I'll guide you through about a 25-minute practice. And I'm playing my guitar. So if your mind's busy, you can anchor into the music, right? And then your meta awareness can tap into the guidance. And it's just, we spend the first half breathing. We connect to the body, connect to our breath. You learn how to just balance your body by becoming aware. Oh, I think I have a little tension right here in this part of the body I didn't realize was there, right? And then sitting with your heart for a couple of minutes. How often do we just sit with our heart just to experience it? What am I feeling right now? That alone weakens that connection, right? And then there's about a 5-7 minute window there where there'll be a little expansion, a little inquiry or contemplation for the day, right? And so the classic questions are, who am I? The classic questions are, what am I longing for? What is my heart longing for? Asking in a way, what is my soul crying for? This takes the weight off of, I have to just sit and be quiet and not have any thoughts. No, have all your thoughts, enjoy them, be with them, but change your relationship to them. Don't be attached to them. Don't let the thoughts have you, right? And so that's the practice. And then we always end with a bit of loving kindness, because ultimately that acceptance for ourselves, not needing that love from the other person, chasing unhealthy connections or relationships or people pleasing or self-sabotage and betrayal, those all stem from not really loving ourselves, right? So not fully embodying that. So the great thing about the community is that you're not alone. You have the accountability. You also have a space to do things wrong and know that you're supported, right? It's like, ask me a question, ask anyone else in the group. They all know, they've been there, right? Isolation is the killer of our most authentic selves, right? We tend to go down those rabbit holes and try to do everything by ourselves because we live in this society of hyper individualism. And at a certain point, we lose ourselves in that, right? So, I mean, in many ways, I feel like we need therapy these days because we're not as connected in community, right? Just to
Absolutely.
show up to and see, oh, this is my friend who gets me, and I can just talk through something with them and be seen, get that real life connection, right? And reflection of who I am, and mother figures, female friends, like that whole thing. Instead, we go to a professional, we pay, and don't get me wrong, I'm glad we have them. But before we had them, we had community.
Yeah.
And you notice they're equal and opposite, right? The less community we have, the more we've needed this therapy model.
Yeah. There's a lot of comfort in all of that. And, community and being social, we're social, animals and there's so much study around that. There's that one study that was going around for a while that I rabbit holed down into a little bit, but that the people that are happiest. I mean, there is a generational study now, through several generations that overwhelmingly show that the original study was about, what brings you happiness? Is it your work? Is it, make it, whatever, a lot of monetary stuff, to where the study itself drifted to, and the feedback they were getting from these generations just developed into what makes them happy is their friends and family, the people they're around. That's what gives them life and
Right.
and all these things. So no, you got me on there too. So no, that's great. I appreciate that. I think that's some real good information. One thing else on that before we jump around here real quick. Are you still good on time for a minute?
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. So the breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So is breathing in itself something to calm the mind, calm your thoughts, and it just gets you back centered? Or is breathing actually meditation, or is it just a tool that it gets incorporated with meditation, like you said, talked about at the beginning, you do some breath work and kind of get a little,
Yeah.
but is it itself? Because breathing is so promoted on everywhere now, social
Yeah.
media, most everything about breathing. With you, it seems to be they're very much intertwined with what you do with your practice. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely intertwined. And breath work, I mean, those who specialize in just breath work, there's so many different modalities within breath work, right? And how you approach the breath, and it can be its own practice. It can be connected to meditation, attention with intention. It can just be its own thing. You count the breath, extend the breath, expand the breath, some breathe in through one nostril, hold, then let go through the other nostril. There's all different kinds of variations. But ultimately, I find that it's self-regulation, right? So this is the way I organize it. You have grounding practice, healing practice, and a transformational practice, right? So grounding for me is self-regulation. How do you get yourself from anxious, stressed to zero, right? To zero. The breath can do that. Just simply counting your breath, 4 in, 4 out. Why? Because your mind's not thinking about the crap that you're thinking
Right.
about, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's awareness. And at the same time, the body's natural response to that stress is to do more because it senses danger, right? So by focusing on your breath, you're not thinking about the thing. And by regulating the evenness of breath, you're sending the signal from two directions to yourself, your being, that I'm okay. Why? Because I have the mental acuity to focus on my breath. I also have the physical experience of even breath, right? Even, slower, regulated breath. Regulation. It's constant. Doing that practice, everything is grounded, right? Then I think of healing as our capacity to hold the suffering, which is all about the non-attachment. So what happens when once you're regulated, now your body wants to heal because it doesn't have to survive. It's out of survival mode. And that's what happens for those guys who might have been resistant. Oh, nothing happened. No, something happened. You were present to your emotions. We think that we have to do so much all the time. I love the emotion as energy in motion, because when we stop resisting, when we're in this stage of like trying to save ourselves from our emotions, we're resisting and the energy is stagnant, right? But if you allow yourself to experience the emotion, you're now holding, right? You have a greater capacity to hold your heaviness and your human experience, your healing, right? And that's when people start crying and letting it go because it's actually moving through them.
So, okay. So this is another thing. This is going to be a long episode. I hope you don't mind.
I don't.
I just got to get a few more things out here as we're going. I'm so intrigued. It's so helpful to me. So everything you just talked about again, and then with the breath work. And so with these guys, and so there's two examples, one question. These guys, and I'm going to speak to two of them specifically that I just remembered attaching to a little bit. So again, remember, these were vets and first responders. And I think both of these guys were actually vets. Different experiences, same but different kind of trauma stuff. They actually didn't get, when they did let those emotions make some movement, it wasn't about them being a vet. Because it's just that the second part, going to the same question. It was about the crap from when they were a kid.
Yeah.
So through my, again, I'm not certified in anything. I have a lot of world experiences. I've been exposed to certain things, and I have my thoughts and feelings on things, which are a little more aggressive with me. I had to really go hard on myself. and really go the isolation route for a minute. And I
Yeah.
had to pull myself out of it.
Yeah.
But so my question back to these guys. So it was connected to that. So do you feel like it seems there's a lot of what's being connected right now is most things seem to be from early childhood. And you
Certainly.
talked about the inner child work. Zach talked about the inner child work. So many other people talk about the inner child work. And I feel like that's exactly what I've been doing with my Self-Care Savage stuff. And I didn't have those words to put. All my stuff stems from that. And it was, and then learning how to survive and being very, I had a very sophisticated repertoire of survival skills before I was 7.
Yeah.
But guess what? And as you know, they don't travel well into adulthood.
Not at all.
I've talked about this forever. That's why I lived with so much dysfunction for so long, because I brought all that in there. And so anytime things got stressful or anything went awry or went crazy, whatever, well, I'm going to revert back to what saved me from the monster back then that has nothing to do with saving me now. But that's what I do. So it destroys relationships. There's no trust. The self-sabotage. I'm the best. If you need to know how to do it, just give me a holler. I'm sensing that's a big part of what you feel too, is that inner child work. Because I heard you mention at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, that's been my experience as well. And I think for all of us, that's really what we're facing. That's why, going back to ourselves, from what I've understood from things I've learned along the way in research and conversations I've had with specialists, is that we all, by the age of 7, develop our default mode network, the default way of being and thinking and understanding the world. And the interesting thing about it is that's really before we have a strong vision center, right? So it's developed without language a lot of the time. Sometimes a lot of it's even earlier than that, like 2, 3, right? All those experiences, ways we tried to make sense of, what was happening around us. And so you go through your life and you have all of these survival strategies that are unconscious to you, and they get you through. You survive. They're not thriving strategies. They're survival strategies.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like you said, they don't travel well. So you get to become an adult and you see how they are setting you up for failure. They no longer work. Right. And then you have to address them. And there's a bunch of ways to address them. And that's the beauty of it, because we all probably need something different in different points in our life and so on and so forth. But what I've found is when I keep saying this, I'm thinking about our default mode network, right? It was established by 7. This happens. This is my response. This happens. This is my response. All self-sabotage patterns. This happens. I breathe. I ground. I walk. This is my response. New path created, right? So that's the practice. It's all at once, right? The pause, the grounding is I regulate, I heal, I hold the emotion, the transformation, grounding, healing, and transformation.
You can't change when you're in it. But so the work is done, like you said, is outside of that, and then getting into your meditative states with the intention. So you can do it, because you can't do it when you're pissed off and angry, or you're in the middle of a divorce, or something with your kids, or what. That's right. It's really hard to then go, okay, I got to work on myself with all these time frames in front of you and all that. It's a lifelong thing, right? It's
100%.
Something staying in it is what keeps us where we need to be, or staying at least connected, so we can keep moving this way forward.
Yeah,
moving forward instead of backwards, regressing or standing still.
Yeah,
man, this is great. This is just feels really. I'm getting all out of this, Joe. I don't know if you're
good.
anything,
I totally am.
This is
I,
crazy.
I think the common thread with all of these practices, though, is just that slowing down.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes, man, this really shifted things for me. It was P.D. Ouspensky, European philosopher, and he said, all of man's troubles come from his inability to sit in a room alone with himself and enjoy the company he keeps, right? And so it's that slowing down factor, that alone time, whether it's those 4 breaths, like the veterans in that group of folks was practicing. Because what happens when you slow down is all of these thoughts come up, these emotions that we hadn't been with, right? Because they didn't really go away. We just buried them with activity, right? Whether we distracted ourselves or we had to be busy doing other things, whether you're a parent or, and not that all of those are bad. I'm just saying that this is what happens. And so when you slow down, whether it's a conscious meditation practice or a nice walk where you're unplugged and you're just with nature, or, you're journaling, all this stuff comes up. It's right there with you. So if you're not enjoying yourself when you're alone, look in the mirror. I'm not saying that everything that happened to you was just, because it most likely wasn't. But now it's your responsibility. And so what are you going to do with those experiences at this point? And the beauty is, once you are aware of them, now you can do something about it, right?
Yeah.
So if I could say anything to anyone, maybe going back to the earlier question, like what's an easy way to practice mindfulness? Just slow down. How could you slow down in your life? Even if it's just for those few breaths, a moment to journal. How can you consciously slow down? Because that's going to do so much.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, again, you can't do it. You can't see what's going on if you're going 100 miles an hour, right? You might, and if you're going 50, you might get a glimpse.
Mm-hmm.
But if you bring it down to a reasonable level,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start seeing, understanding, and adjusting.
Yeah.
All those things. Yeah, it's all. This is how you're fixing me. I'm not paying you for this.
Hey, it's a mutual exchange. It's beautiful. I appreciate you.
Okay, so let's do something where we'll kind of move to wrapping up, but there's a couple of things in between here and see where this goes. Now, you were just talking about something about that quote, and which leads into social media a little bit, where I'm going with this, okay? Because this is a big part of what we do. Social media is here to stay, and I have not a lot, but there's some conversations I probably get in with people more than others because I'm an old head. I have people, I'm one of the very few that's operating this way on social media and also promoting it in the sense that look, whether we like it or not, there are the good parts of it. And if you want to help expand that, then get off your ass and why don't you spread some of your wisdom from all these years you have and help some people.
Exactly.
But the other piece of that is social media is here to stay. If you want to be relevant, it doesn't matter who you are. You want to run a business, you want to start up, coaching, teach more people about meditation, or do what I do to just try to get people to understand they need to love themselves a little bit more, Go look in the mirror and I hope you feel loved, look at yourself in the mirror. Do you feel loved? That's where I want people to get. So we have these messages, and the only way to get them across is we can walk around on the street or we can hold signs up everywhere, that are trying to put that out. But social media is the place. So you get me, and everybody else knows that too. But we have this problem there, and I don't know if it's so much of a problem, but it's part of it is the constant combating of like I talked about a little bit earlier, just misinformation, putting out information that's not about what you do. Like, look, I'm not afraid to admit, that, 60% of the words coming out of your mouth are connecting dots for me, and
Sure.
this is what I do in a sense. But if I'm not still learning, or I'm not still understanding how I can incorporate that into making myself better, which makes other people better, and that's by doing it, having done it,
Right.
doing it,
Right.
and or been there and doing it now. And that's a lot about what's not happening out there. Still, allow myself to be disappointed by people. And I already know that's not what I ever should be doing, but I continuously this day I've set myself up with little things around somebody and or a group of people, and I've just gotten disappointed. Not because they need or should or do anything different or be. It's just that they weren't what I put them out to be. That's why I just a big proponent is I'm just not really interested in ever listening to anything you have to say unless you're showing it.
Right. Yeah.
And like you're outdoors. You're like me. I mean, it's quite evident, what I'm trying to promote with what I'm trying to promote. And the stuff I put out is, sometimes a lot of personal stuff. And I just sometimes, again, I've gotten I got disappointed with that for a minute. And then that's why one of the reasons I wanted to do this. I thought, the best thing for me to do is bring people into the fold that are who they say they are and doing the things they say they are. That. And because I think you need more attention, but a lot of those people need or should be having or influence. Look, I'm not trying to save the world or just flip these balances all of a sudden real quick because of what I have to say, but I just think that it's an opportunity for me to magnify that. And to tell you the truth, I'm not sure exactly why I went down this road, but I think it was leading into the social media and things like that are really important. And I think, so tell me a little bit what social media means to you. Also address what you think, maybe give some, what you would tell yourself back when you first started that you might do differently with social media. This is kind of helping others understand what they may be doing or what they're wanting to do to help people kind of grow through that. And trolls and the negative stuff and how you exactly maybe handle that. And then, how you stay real. I know I just threw a bunch of questions at you there, but you understand what I'm asking.
I think I got you.
Social media.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before I answer the question, I want to say thank you for using your platform in this way and inviting me in. I really appreciate the invitation to connect with you and share with you. I think since that Coyote Wolf interview we were all on, it was nice to connect with you and all of the overlap, right? So it's really great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think the actual question around what does social media mean to me and this whole piece with what others are doing, people jumping on trends or trolls. So I went through a period. It wasn't until really COVID. I had COVID or during COVID, and I had a divorce. Okay. And that season, I already knew things were changing for me. And before then, I've always been a very spiritual person, but it wasn't public facing. It was very personal. And all you saw on my social media was just my music and a few things here and there about my personal life. And during that season, there was an emotional death for me. I think before then I was kind of paralyzed by fear. This is for those who might be on the cusp of their own entrance into this space, right? So for me, it was like, oh, I want to share, but what if people don't like me, right? What if they have something to say? I don't know if I can handle everybody's opinions about me not doing everything perfectly or in the way that they would want me to, right? All of that stuff, because that's inevitable. And so I was paralyzed with fear and worry, right, around how I might be received. And then George Floyd happened, and I was really upset, felt all the emotions. And I went on a walk. I was living in New York City at the time, and long walk, just trying to ground my energy because it was not grounded. There's a lot of fear and anger and frustration. And then I had this vision. It's kind of wild. I saw before me, it was like Black people being killed. My ancestors from all generations to the present day. I saw George Floyd's, like thousands. And then finally I saw myself. I saw my own face like being killed. And what woke me up around that is I can be the most upright citizen, say all the things that I know to say in all the right places and betray myself, right? Like I had done up until that point in my life in a million different ways, and still die unjustly and unknowingly at any moment. And what will I have lived for? Right?
Yeah.
And so for me at that point, I went from not being paralyzed by fear to not being able to keep my mouth closed, where I knew that, okay, I have to go through. I have to learn. I have to grow. And the only way to do that, going back to what you said earlier, is I have to jump in and experience, right? I have to find my voice in this medium, in this platform, and what I want to say and how I want to say it. And so I started to sit with it in a more practical sense of, okay, social media is just a tool. Yes, Facebook has their algorithm, TikTok has their algorithm, but ultimately it's a place online where I can upload video, captions, and images. Now, what's my relationship to this platform? So I made my own rules. So for me, it was all about the state of being. I want to be in a loving energy. I want to be open to connected to my heart first before I even press record. And then what I want to share, I want it to help others tap into themselves so that we can be free of all of the things that society is hurtling on us, right? You're not enough, this consumerism, right? Hyper individualism. And lastly, regarding trolls and everything else, I had to accept that no matter what I do, people are going to love it, hate it, or not care. Doesn't matter. I could tell the whole world I love you all day and someone would say, you're saying I love you weird. What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's inevitable, right?
Yeah.
And I think I got served that in a harsh way with music, right? Because you can look at some of the world's most amazing musicians who 90% of people would love, and there's still that 10% who's like, no, not Stevie Wonder, not Beyonce, not John Mayer, not whoever, right? So understanding that and accepting that, it's like, okay, well, how do I want to address if someone comes in, says I have a big nose, or just like totally like in a whole different energy than anything I'm expressing? It's like, okay, I just I would respond with genuineness. I wanted to embody. So I remember someone said I had a big nose early on, and I was like,
That's
I was like,
ridiculous.
well, you're not wrong. I do have a beautiful big nose. But I got on and I responded and I said, oh, hi, you're right. I have a beautiful black nose. This is my ancestors' nose, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. I'm not just going to celebrate my nose. I'm going to celebrate my gap. I'm going to celebrate the fact that I have a blind left eye. I'm going to celebrate all of the things about myself that you think are funny, because this is just a part of who I am and the gifts I get to bring to the world, right? And in that moment, I was like, I don't have to be a victim to everything that's happening. And I think that's another thing that we don't realize is that self-sabotage thing, those frustrations, is we're still embodying that inner child energy, which is that kind of vulnerableness to what's happening, not realizing that now as an adult, I'm a part of what's happening. I have a response. So I wanted to have a conscious response. Sometimes it means I engage in that way, and maybe it's playful and it's light. Other times it means I won't engage because I don't want to feed that kind of energy. And I put in like spam filters and things, keyword filters. And other times I may sit with something if it's coming up, like a certain aspect of something I'm sharing or a question. And then I want to create a conscious piece of content to address this in a larger, more thoughtful way, in a month or 6 months later, once I've had time to really sit with it, if it's something that's new for me. But I know all of it's going to help me grow and expand and become more aware of myself, but also help me to expand in a way where I get to be more present to the world and what's happening around me, and hopefully serve the collective in a better way. So I would say to anyone, it's stop avoiding, right? That's like our biggest issue. We avoid all these things. Don't avoid. Be present to it, face it, and cultivate your inner strength, right? Embody your worthiness, embody the validity of your ideas and your thoughts and your presence in the world, because that's not going away. People are going to love it, hate it, or not care. You can be whoever you want to be, the most perfect person, the saint. It's inevitable, because the other side of that is people are always addressing you relative to who they are.
Do you see any of that as them being damaged people to be able to take the time to tell you you got a big nose, or you got a, that they don't, whatever. I mean, do you see that as them being someone themselves that's hurting or
Oh, certainly. Well, now it's, as soon as I know someone comes at me with that energy, because I take my time, like you said, walking is that sacred space, and most of mine is out on the trail too, because I'm coming from a heart energy. Okay, this is what I'm giving. If that's where they are when they receive it and they want to respond in that way, that's them. And so we co-created a thing. I made a piece of content and they made a comment. Okay, cool. If you want to avoid yourself because something about me is triggering an insecurity, that's your right. I'm not going to judge it. That's just where you are in your journey.
So do you leave those alone? Do you leave those comments alone, or delete them, or anything like that? Or do you still take a minute sometimes?
What's interesting, I get a lot less of them now, and it ebbs and flows. There's not a hard thing. I'll say that. But in general, I try to approach it consciously. So going back to the coal, right? Because sometimes they can be upsetting for me to read, right? Depending on what's said. And I get into my curiosity, openness, acceptance. And then I get to this last thing. What's the most loving response I'm available for? That's the question I'm always asking when I'm in that space, once I'm grounded. And sometimes it's like, oh, I'm going to be playful and, share and practice love for myself. Other times, I'm just going to let them be where they are with that whole idea, because I have a lot of other things to do. I got to talk to Scott today. I've got whatever else on my plate. Other times it might mean I just need to witness this and give space to this, because intuitively that's what I'm getting. And what's funny is sometimes like other followers or subscribers will come in defense or with something very neutralizing or balancing or hilarious. And those are my favorites, because it's like, oh, okay. I didn't have to do anything.
People.
Yeah.
That's your community. My community is, I tell them, I don't tell them as much as I used to, and I don't tell them enough that this used to be about me. I talk about this a lot. Everything I did used to be about me. There was nothing designed about it. The videos I was putting out was when I was really going after my work and if on me, so that it was to hold me accountable. All those friendly reminders. There's not one of them that I don't need to hear. But it was about holding me accountable and legacy. That was the only thing I was thinking about. And then of course people started listening and all that, and then I'd start talking about me, and this is why me, and this is what happened to me, poor me. And so another couple of years went by, and I was just, really healing, finally getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And I got to a point 2 years ago, I think anybody can go back and look on my social media and see, I started talking about, I said, you know what, you will never hear this ever being about me anymore. And it's because of y'all. I tell my community, it's because of y'all. I get more from this whole thing, this whole platform, everything about it than y'all do. And thank you. And thank you for letting me be a part of it. But this is no longer about me, and you're not going to hear that anymore. This is about all of us.
Yeah.
And so those are the things I'm so appreciative about. And back to it. So with trolls and things like that. There was a time years ago on Facebook, before I really got going on Instagram with anything, just my regular Facebook page before I turned it into the You Can Outdoors page or or set the page separate. You know, I'd show somebody my truck and said, you know, I went out and, you know, got stuck in the mud today doing something stupid. And just somebody just coming at me hard, some gooberhead for nothing.
Yeah.
And, you know, saying, oh, that doesn't look like you've been in the mud, city boy, or something like that. So 48 hours later, and I'm still banging on those keys, you know? So here's what I'm saying. So this is where a lot of us are very different. So I so appreciate where you're at. And I think that there's still hope for me to get in a little more zen of a place. If I let it set in and I don't address it immediately, and for me, it's see ya, goodbye.
Yeah.
So it does not, so that's part of me not allowing it to set back in. It's just like language. It's very rarely you will hear me cuss. And sometimes I do. And if I do, I can go back and look at the video and say, look, I'm kind of mad.
Right.
It's tied a little bit of in anger for me. So I work really hard to not do that. So that is, I think there's not one perfect way.
Exactly.
But I think that what you just said is great, because it's another way. That's a very positive way, a way to reflect and maybe understand what is going on, that whole, maybe sit back in the theater for a minute and, you know, what's this, is that what this is about? Or is it over here? Yeah, everything. So that's what I love. So again, connecting something else for me, again, there's no one correct way on some of these things.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
And we all have our ways to deal with it. The point is to find the self-awareness and find what does work for you so you can progress and move forward and look in the mirror and love yourself and all those things. So
exactly.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. Yeah, the social media piece I think is the toughest part right now. And again, I just think there's so much with us having these conversations are going to be helpful to some way. And I don't care, again, just like my community. I don't, if I put a post out or I put this out in a couple of weeks on YouTube and then all across podcast platforms, I don't care if anybody listens to it except for one person and goes, holy crap.
Yeah.
I love Joel.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. I'm going to go get this book. I'm going to go whatever and change their life. One of the things I try to tell and strive to people to be more authentic and get to these points is because when you get praise and you get something from somebody that says, oh my gosh, your story and that thing you said about that thing just really, really got me out of this funk and away from this person. Like you and I, you know, as much as we have those few dum-dums that participate in our platforms for whatever reason, and they feel that they have to let us know this thing, you know, there's all these people. I know that you get DMs and I know that you get your comments, and I know that it's these people they're not like, hey, thanks, man. Great advice. Some of these people are like, again, you saved my life. Here's where I was.
Oh yeah.
If I didn't get away from this person, I don't know if I'd be alive right now. All of these different things. And so I tell people, that's the payoff. If you want to go next level, I call it self-care savage. You want to be next level self-care savage.
Yeah.
That's next level, because that is now you're spreading a message and telling your story and sharing with others and helping them.
Exactly.
And that's what, you know, that's the whole thing. That's the whole, gosh, sometimes I can't get words out I want to get out, but that's just the whole chalupa, you know, the whole thing, you know, everything together, because it's all going to be the good and bad. And it's what you pull from it, take out of it, what you share with people. And that's the big thing. So, okay. So now we're going to kind of wrap things up. So
okay.
Where are you going? Where's Joe going? Look, there's things we didn't touch on. Maybe, you know, maybe after the first year, maybe we can revisit some things that I think are
Sure.
very important. We didn't talk enough about the outdoors. We didn't talk
Yeah.
about enough about your exposure to it. I know you've traveled around a little bit. I see you in some of your places. I think you've got an RV. I think
Hmm.
there's look. I know. Look, you're doing that, and that's part of what's helping you. And
Oh
so
yeah.
we'll get into that later. but but from here, where we're at now, and what we did, where are you headed? What's your maybe next move if you have one?
Hmm.
Um, and where do you want to mostly point people to you? You did say a lot earlier about your broadcast channel and your
Hmm.
meditation thing you do every day, which don't be surprised if you see me in there or something.
Yeah.
But
You're welcome anytime.
see all that happening, but again, where you at and where you going and where do you want everybody to
Yeah.
mostly participate with you?
Sure. Um, so yeah, these days I'm not traveling in the camper as much. I'm kind of nestled in Arkansas. Got some land out here, which is nice. But I think what's coming up for me is a couple of things. So there's always the Beautiful Souls community. And you can find that at my website, asouldcalledjoel.com. More information there. Daily meditations. But for those who just kind of want a trial run, maybe at the first of the year, we always do a 30-day meditation challenge. So we do that for the month of January, and you can join us. It's 30 days. It's beginner friendly, and we go through the basics, and you get a taste of, okay, well, how do I feel after 30 days of meditating every day? If you can't make it live, there's a recording that people can check out. And it's beautiful because I always get comments like, wow, I didn't think I'd ever be able to meditate, but I'm learning now, and this is helping me in this way, and I'm not as upset with my partner or this person in my life, and I'm starting to learn something about myself that I couldn't see before, and it's so beautiful because, like you were sharing earlier, like that's why I do it. Like this is what lights me up. I get more out of it, or just as much maybe as the other. It's a big value of mine is like reciprocal nourishment, reciprocal exchange in all aspects of life,
It's a
and
great thing.
and so to get to experience that. That's one. Also, I'm working on a new project with India Ari again. Doesn't have a name, but it'll be sound. It's sound healing and mantra. So I'll be playing the guitar. We're writing some songs, but it's affirmations. If you
Yep.
took any one of our quotes from our daily content, right, and then just played it as a song for, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes with some music around it and some space. That's kind of the vibe, right? It's mantra. And it's meant to help you get into that state. So that's a practice in itself. Attentions on the music with the intention of that mantra to help you get grounded. And that'll be, I'm not sure, but look for it sometime next year, 2025. And anything else, just go to my website, asouldcalledjoel.com, and join my newsletter. And I put out regular mailings with all the latest updates. So,
Nice. Perfect. So now I'm going to put you on the spot for one last thing.
okay.
Okay. So you may have to kind of get in the so-called Joel
Oh, the so-called Joel.
persona. And so we're going to, so you got to give me one of these, how's your heart things, one of your openings, maybe just, whatever you want to give around it, 20, 30 seconds, just let's give everybody a taste. I'm going to put this in at the beginning on the teaser, and
Okay.
then we'll leave this in at the end. But again, these are it's visual to me. Your voice is in my head now, and it's very calming. You have the delivery is I think very attractive. So you gotta hook me up with that
Okay.
whenever you're ready.
Sure. Um, hmm. Hello, beautiful soul. How's your heart? May you remember that your worthiness is inherent, There is no one that can take away your value, your strength, your light. So may you shine, always shine so brightly.
Yes. Joel, thanks so much, man. I so appreciate it. I think people are going to love you and love this. And I was very, very grateful to have this conversation. I feel just like I'm full of so much more great information.
Oh, well, thank
So
you.
I so appreciate it. So,
Thank
all
you,
right, let me
Scott.
cut this off here.